Next up on our list is Cade Marlowe. Cade Marlowe, of course, coming up after the Jared Kelnick injury. It kind of ended terribly, kind of came crashing down real hard. But the overall Cade Marlowe experience was one that I found encouraging. We'll get into it. But before we get into it, I want to thank Simply Seattle again. Simply Seattle provides the very best in Seattle sports gear. Lots of great stuff for the Mariners, of course, but also the Kraken, the Supersonics, the Huskies, Cougars, Storms, Sounders. You can find it all at Simply Seattle. And hey, once you find it all, why not take 15% off your order by using code MOLLYWOP15, MOLLYWHOP15. Just type it in right below your checkout, automatically gives you that discount. It's a great deal from great people. I cannot appreciate them enough for sponsoring the show and just being awesome dudes and awesome people. SimplySeattle.com. There is a link in the description. So Cade Marlowe ends up playing in 34 games and making exactly 100 plate appearances. It's always nice when it's nice and even like that. Hits 239, 330, 420, 750 OPS with 3 homers and 4 stolen bases in 6 attempts. That is an OPS plus of 111. The overall experience for Cade Marlowe, I think, is one that the Mariners should look back on and say, this could be a thing. At the very least, I'm very encouraged by Cade Marlowe being a bench bat for the Seattle Mariners. I will caution, though, that things started out so hot and then ended so unbelievably terribly, okay? He gets 2 hits against Baltimore on August 11th, and through those first 16 games, he was hitting 326, 420, 558, 978 OPS. From that point on to end the season, he makes 18 appearances. He makes 50 plate appearances, 45 at-bats. And he hits 156, 240, 289. And he strikes out in 23 of his 45 at-bats. Oof. That is not good, folks. There is no denying that as good as Cade Marlowe looked in the first half of the experience, just as bad in the second half, if not worse. No, I'm not going there. I will say nearly as bad. In the inverse. There was just too much good in that first half, and there were just so many plate appearances Cade Marlowe took where it might have been a quiet wow, not a Julio wow or a big dumper wow, but where I just go kind of, wow, that was a good at bat, where he fouls off tough pitches and ends up, even if the result wasn't there, he made the pitcher work and he looked better for it. There were a ton of those at bats. And one of the other encouraging things, I think, is yes, it's a fairly small sample of only 26 plate appearances, but he was awesome against lefties. 280, 308, 600, 1 homer, hit a couple of triples, also a double. That's really strong. That's really strong. And that's against left-handed starters too, against left-handed, that's against left-handers altogether. Against left-handed starters, not as good, 235, 350, 412. That's not terrible, especially for a rookie, especially for a guy playing in the major leagues for the very first time. I will take those numbers. And yeah, it ended awfully. But we don't need Cade Marlowe to have a 900 OPS for him to be a successful player, because he's a guy who can run. He can run with the best of them. He can steal bases. And he can go get it in the outfield. I'm comfortable with Cade Marlowe playing all 3 outfield positions. Not a great arm, so, prefer him in center or left, but not like this is not the Michael Bourne situation or the Johnny Damon situation where dude just can't throw. I was really curious to look at what his savant stats were going to tell me, and I'm not surprised that they're not great. Expected batting average of 191, in part because he only hit the ball hard 30.9% of the time, and he swung and missed 29.4% of the time, and ended 1/3 of his at-bats and strikeouts, obviously much higher in the second half. But there's some good here. A walk rate of 12%, awesome. Sweet spot, that's such a hard thing for me to say for whatever reason. He made contact with the sweet spot 41.8% of the time, Only barreled at 7.3, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. I was encouraged by what I saw from Cade Marlowe, especially for a rookie. A rookie being thrown into a situation where the Mariners were competing for a playoff spot, and I thought he more than held his own until the end when he was, look, there's no denying it, he was terrible. He was terrible over the second half of that time. But I saw enough to think, at the very least, this is a very good fourth outfielder and just maybe can develop into a starter. One thing working against Cade Marlowe, unfortunately, is his age. He's already 26 years old. He will turn 27 in June. So we'll call him 26 and a half. So, we'd prefer this profile at the age of 23, 24 for sure. Maybe younger. But don't hold too much against him in that regard. We have lots of late bloomers. Lots of late bloomers. I think one thing that will get held against him is that he got off to a pretty poor start in Tacoma, too. I don't know. He passed the eye test for me. Cade Marlowe absolutely passed the eye test to be at least a solid backup outfielder. Having said that, is he someone that I want being a starting outfielder next year? No. No, you cannot have Cade Marlowe open the year as one of your starting outfielders if you are serious about being a World Series contender or a playoff contender or a contender of any sorts. Can't happen. Can't happen. As impressed as I was in those 100 plate appearances, especially the first 50, cannot happen. Nope. No siree, Bob. If your corner outfielders to open the year next year are Cade Marlowe and Dominic Canzone, and that's not an insult to Cade Marlowe. He's just not ready for that. And he may never be ready for that. But I'll be very curious to see what they do with him. Because I'd give him every chance to win a roster spot, including, I have to tell you this, and we'll see how they do in spring trading and stuff like that. Cade Marlowe would get, I really want Cade Marlowe on the roster over Zach DeLoach. If Zach DeLoach cuts down the strikeouts in Tacoma or cuts them really down and looks great in Arizona, great. Then maybe he has the advantage. But because of Cade Marlowe's speed and defense, I think he makes more sense on the roster. Just one guy's opinion. Were you as impressed with especially the first 15 or so games from Cade Marlowe as I was? Man, I just saw so many great at-bats. So many at-bats where even when the result ended up being poor, he fouled off tough pitches and hung in there. And he fouled off tough pitches in the second part of that season too. It just ultimately ended in strikeouts an awful lot. So yeah, what do you think of Cade Marlowe? Please hit like, please hit subscribe, please comment down below, all of that good stuff. It's so appreciated. Next up, we've got some of the guys that we're really counting on for 2024. And by we, I mean the Seattle Mariners, but also we, I mean just the fans of the Mariners who need this to be a good year. Talk soon. Hey, go sign Shohei Ohtani.